Hi, my name is Rochelle, and I am from Red Scorpio Handmade, and I'm doing a little presentation about pricing for profit today because it's August now, the end of August, but the holidays will be here before we know it, and it's time to start preparing for holiday sales by getting all of our ducks in a row. So the San Diego chapter is hosting a series of hangouts talking about each little part of getting ready for the holidays, starting with pricing, and then we're going to move to getting media ready. We're going to do a talk about product photography and marketing and setting up a holiday schedule so that you're prepared for when the holiday madness hits, because the holiday season doesn't start in December. It starts well before that, and if you're a hand maker, this is now the time that you need to start preparing for that. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here because I made a keynote, and there it is. Let me see if I can play this. This is my first keynote, so hopefully this works. Okay, so pricing for profit. I feel like most of the members of Academy of Handmade have put a lot of thought into pricing. They understand that pricing is important for being in business and not just having an expensive hobby. So we're going to go over a couple of pricing myths that you may or may not still believe at this point in your business. One is that price equals the cost of the materials times 2 or sometimes times 3. I have a feeling that most people in Academy of Handmade are well beyond this myth. They understand that price includes the cost of materials and labor and overhead. And some of you might realize that you have to build profit into your pricing. But there's a lot of other people who sell handmade stuff online. I'm just going to say Etsy. A lot of sellers on Etsy do not factor in the cost of labor when pricing, and frequently will just double or triple the cost of materials. Excuse me. And think that that's going to be good enough because they can afford to buy more materials with that money, and therefore they can make a profit. And that's simply not true. Another pricing myth is that you'll never do wholesale, so it doesn't matter if you price your goods for wholesale. And that could possibly be true. But if someone approaches you about wholesale and your prices are not ready, then you're kind of stuck. You can't just like raise your prices and say, oh, well, this is my new price because now I'm selling wholesale. And you don't want to necessarily turn them down, although maybe you do. Maybe you don't want to do wholesale. That's totally legit if you don't want to. The third myth is that high prices scare away customers. That is probably the biggest story that handmakers tell themselves, is that if they don't make their stuff affordable, they're not going to sell. And here is a pricing truth, and that is that there is no wrong way or right way to price your stuff. Pricing is a choice that you make. It's based on how you want to market, how you want to position your products, the stories that you want to tell with your products, and the kind of business that you want to be in. You can, if this is your choice, price your handmade goods at just 2 or 3 times the cost of materials if that's what you want to do. You're going to create a lot of work for yourself, and leave a lot of money on the table that way, but how you price your stuff is totally up to you. Also, you could price it on the very high end if that's what you want to do. That is a choice that you make. You're going to have to back it up with positioning your goods and marketing, and the kind of story that you tell with your branding is very important for high-end stuff, but it's totally doable. So the basic pricing for profit formula is price is the materials plus labor plus overhead plus profit. And I'm sure most of you watching this realize what materials mean, what labor means, what overhead and profit means, but I'll go over it real quick. Material is all the supplies that you need to produce the product itself. It doesn't include the packaging or shipping supplies or anything like that. That goes under overhead. The labor is the cost to make the piece, including production assistance. So if you have something that takes 2 hours to make, and you have to pay somebody for part of that time, you have to include that in the cost of labor. So it doesn't include the cost of actually running the business. Those are not billable hours. You're not going to consider labor costs in, all the social media marketing that you need to do, working on your website, reaching out to retailers for wholesale and all that. That's not included in the cost of labor. It's only the cost the time that it takes to actually make the piece that you're selling. And overhead is, you have to have a place to make this stuff. It takes, power and lights and water and all of that to have a studio space. You're going to have to include insurance, web hosting, licenses and fees and things, advertising, the supplies to package, and then the actual cost of shipping stuff. There might be legal fees, booth fees if you sell at markets and things like that. That's all overhead. And then the profit is a little bit that you pad in there so that you can reinvest into the growth of your business, which is super important. If you want to be a sustainable business, you have to plan for growth. Okay, so this is a breakdown of an item that I'm just using as an example. I hope this little window isn't showing on my screen where it says Hangouts is sharing this window. I hope you guys can't see that because it's kind of in the way of the slide, but I don't know, Hangouts are so weird, and now they're going over to YouTube, so they're probably going to get even glitchier. Okay, anyway, a $12 item costs $5 in materials. It takes 10 minutes to make, and you're charging an hourly rate of $15 an hour, so that comes to $2.50 for the labor to create this product. And then once you've gone over all your overhead and you break it down into what per piece cost of overhead is, we come up with $3.40. And then also added in a 5% profit, which on a $12 item is 60 cents. So I'm just going to show you how hard it is to make a living if you're charging $12, even if the item itself only costs $5 in materials and only takes you $10 to make. If you sold 1,000 units, you would make $12,000 in gross revenue. That's not including all the overhead, profit, materials, etc. And the labor is the portion that's paid to you for making this stuff. So at $2.50 per piece, the average cost time it takes to make this $12 item times 1,000 items gives you a total of $2,500 for 1,000 pieces. So it takes you 10 minutes to make it, but when you make 1,000 things that take 10 minutes to make, it's 167. I should have put hours. It's 167 hours to make that. So 167 hours per month equals, it's actually closer to 38 hours per week, but I rounded it up to 40 just because, so it's a round number, which gives you a gross figure of $556 per week as your salary for working 40 hours a week making this $12 item. Okay, so $556 a week might sound reasonable, but when you consider that as an entrepreneur, as someone who's self-employed, $15 an hour is not near enough to pay yourself, because you have to take into account the taxes that go into payroll. Once you start making over, I think it's only $400 a year, self-employed, you are responsible for paying your own Social Security. As a small business, you can expense out almost anything, but you can't expense out taxes and Social Security. The government will collect their money. You can't deduct for that. You have to pay your Social Security. You have to pay your payroll taxes. So this $556 per week that you're grossing is going to actually, when you take into account that you're going to have to pay taxes at some point, be a lot less than that. Also, when you look at this breakdown, it is not taking into account any other part of making this $12 item other than making the item itself. It doesn't take into account that you need to, if you're shipping it, if you're selling online, you have to ship these things. If you're selling at shows, you have to get to the show, set up, etc. You have to, you're not selling 1,000 units probably in one show. That's probably show after show after show. It's not taken into account, you know, if you sell online at Etsy, like doing your shop listings, taking pictures of your stuff, or any other part of it. And as we know, as handmade businesses, making the item is a very small part of actually being in a handmade business. There's like a million other things that you have to do. So if you are working 40 hours a week so that you can produce 1,000 units a month, you don't really have time for anything else. So that $12 figure is actually closer to what the wholesale price should be. When you work this formula out, you're actually coming up with the wholesale price versus the retail price. You should always be able to have a wholesale price that's profitable to you, so that if anything does happen where someone reaches out to you, or you get an opportunity to put a bunch of items in a shop, you're going to make a profit on it. Nobody wants to work for free. And there's no such thing as a loss leader, an item that you don't make a lot of money on because it gets people in the door, or it, you know, you sell enough of them so that you eventually will make like a decent amount of money. Every piece in your line needs to make a profit for you to make it worth it for you to be in business. I mean, bottom line. So this the wholesale price that we came up with using this figure is actually should be ×2 for the retail base price. And actually some retailers will want to mark it up 2.5. And if you're doing a really high-end product, sometimes they'll want to mark it up 3 times. So you have to be able to make sure that you can make a profit and they can make sales. One more thing I would say about this chart, this formula, is that $15 an hour is not enough to charge for labor. A lot of creative business gurus will recommend labor costs closer to $60 an hour. I myself charge $30. That's the labor price that I factor into my stuff. And it should be higher. I live in Southern California and it's pretty expensive to live here. So all my costs are a lot higher than a lot of other places. So when you factor in that I'm not actually getting paid that whole $30 an hour once they take out the taxes and stuff like that, it's probably closer to, it probably is actually closer to $15 an hour than 30 after all said and done. You can also bump up this profit too, because you are absolutely in control of how much profit you work into the price of your items. So the myth number 2 is that you'll never do wholesale, so it doesn't matter. And I would say that, I mean, that is absolutely a choice that you can make. You don't ever have to do wholesale. You don't ever have to do anything in your business that you don't want to do. That's one of the great things about being in business for yourself. You don't have to, if you love doing shows, you love meeting people, you love setting up, you love being there, you know, working the crowd and stuff, and you can make a living doing it, then that's fine. I mean, that is totally legit. If you should always set up your business for the worst case scenario though, and not the best case scenario, because best case scenario is that you're always healthy, you never have a conflict, you're able to go to these shows all the time, you always get in to the shows, you always have a decent sales at these shows. And the worst case scenario is that, you know, it rains that day, so you don't sell anything. Nobody shows up. It's not the person who's putting on the craft show isn't marketing it well, so you don't get a lot of traffic. You're sick. You can't make it. You're down with the flu for a week, so you miss out 2 weeks of shows because they happen on the weekends, and it just so happens that you get sick on Saturday and you don't get well until the following Saturday. So you have to think with the mindset that you have to prepare for a worst case scenario, not always the best case scenario, and make sure that your prices are able to take care of you when you can't show up at the show. Also, if you are approached by a local retailer and they want to put your stuff in their shop, that takes a lot of the work off of you, because they're going to do all the marketing, they're going to do all the customer service, they're going to do all the, you know, the selling for you. So being able to do wholesale opens up a whole lot of time for you to do more things, because like I said, making the product is only a small part of the time that you're working, and the rest of it is selling. And that's, you know, not everyone's favorite thing. It's not mine, that's for sure. So if you can get someone to help you out, a retailer who's going to sell your stuff for you, that it's worth. A lot of people think of selling wholesale as that they're giving someone half of the profits of what they're selling. And that is sort of true, because if your wholesale price is $12 an hour and your retail price is $24 an hour, yeah, I mean, they're getting that money and you're not, but they're also doing a ton of the work that you don't, you know, makes it so you don't have to do it. It's, in my opinion, totally worth it to me. The third pricing myth is that high prices scare away customers. And it is true that you can price out of a market if you raise your prices, but it's also true that some customers don't want to buy stuff they consider underpriced. People often have a low figure in mind when shopping, and they don't want to go under that, just as much as they'll have a high figure in mind and they don't want to go over it, because it's a perceived value, especially if you're buying a gift. If you're buying a gift, you have a dollar amount in mind for the person that you're buying the gift for. And so you're not going to look at anything that's below that because you don't want to seem cheap. You know, you have a window in mind of what you're going to spend on this gift. So anything that's below that is not even on your radar. One way around this problem is to have kind of a diverse line. So you do have stuff that's a little bit more accessible for people who are on a budget. So having like smaller things that are easier to make, quicker to make. That way you can have like a kind of a scale of your line from affordable to higher end. And I want to just show you this next slide and reconfirm that people spend money on things that they want. This spaghetti sauce that costs $11 a jar this is a picture that I took at Albertsons, a local grocery store in Southern California, and it's sitting right next to Ragu that's $2.99 a jar. And look at how many there are. There's like 4 brands of high-end. I cut off one of them, but there was at least 4 brands of spaghetti sauce that were selling for almost $11 an hour. $11 a jar at the grocery store. So it just confirms the fact that if you want something higher end, if you have a price in mind that you want to pay for something, that you will spend the money if it's something that you want. People do like to get a bargain, but people are also willing to pay for the things that they truly want. And price isn't always a factor. I mean, just look at yourself and your own spending habits and think of the times when you bought something that you really loved and the price didn't deter you from purchasing it, even though it wasn't the cheapest thing. It wasn't in the cheapest one available. I myself go out to eat a lot, and it's way cheaper to cook food at home. But if I want to have the experience of going out to a nice restaurant and having good food and not have to clean up the dishes and all of that, then I'm willing to spend money on it. If I wanted a beautiful handmade sweater that showed the person that I was giving it to that how much I cared about them and how much I was willing to purchase something of quality because it was meaningful and special. I mean, that's, people spend money on things that they want. So bottom line is that the pricing truth is that there is no wrong or right way to price, that it is a choice that you make, and you have to make the choices based on how you feel about being in business, how you feel about positioning your products in the market, and how you feel about selling to your customers. Your business should be sustainable. If you are in business, then that should be the #1 goal, is to be sustainable. You don't want to burn yourself out. You don't want to underprice yourself out of the market. And you don't want to be working 40 hours a week and trying to sell 1,000 units a month so that they can be affordable. Your business should be enjoyable. You should enjoy going to work. You should enjoy making your products, and you should enjoy being able to provide a quality handmade product to happy customers. And that is the end of it. So let's see if anybody joined us. Okay, I guess we don't have any questions. I don't see any in the chat here, so I'm going to wrap it up. If you do have any questions, you can post them in the forum, and I will answer them for you. Otherwise, that is our hangout for tonight, and thank you very much.